This is India, the world's most populous country. Young, fast-growing, and increasingly central to global economic conversations. But is it enough to beat China? And over the last few years, a simple idea has taken hold. China is slowing down. Companies are diversifying. India is next. It's a clean narrative. It feels logical. And if you focus on headline GDP growth, it even looks convincing. But here's the uncomfortable truth. India can boom, and still not beat China. Because when people say beat China, they don't just mean getting richer. They mean something much more specific. Becoming the world's factory, dominating exports, building dense industrial supply chains, and reshaping global trade flows. And once you look at the numbers behind that ambition, the gap is still enormous. China's economy is roughly 19 trillion. India's is about 4 trillion. That's not a small lead. That's a different weight class. And it's not just about size. It's about productivity. China produces nearly 5 times more economic output per person than India. So the real question isn't whether India can grow, it already is. The real question is whether India can grow in the same way China did. Fast enough, deep enough, and industrial enough to catch up. And the answer, if we're being precise, is not in the way people imagine. Because China isn't just big. China is integrated. India is still building that integration. So in this video, we'll break down why and what that actually means through 5 practical realities most people overlook. And at the end, I'll give you the real India story. It's still massive, just not the one-line version everyone wants to believe. 1. The gap nobody likes saying out loud. Let's start with the most boring metric that ends most debates instantly: size. China's GDP is around 19.4 trillion. India is about 4.1 trillion. That means India would need to add roughly an entire Germany multiple times just to get close. But GDP size isn't the most important gap. The most important gap is the one that determines industrial power: exports. In 2024, China exported roughly 3.58 trillion in merchandise. India's merchandise exports in 2024 were about 443 billion, and India's share of global merchandise exports was around 1.8%. Put that side by side, China is exporting on a scale that's closer to world infrastructure. India is exporting on a scale that's major developing economy. Both are big, but they're not comparable. And exports matter because exports create manufacturing learning curves, foreign currency buffers, supply chain density, and ecosystems of specialized firms that feed each other. This is where the India will replace China story usually breaks. Because replacing China doesn't mean getting a few factories. It means replacing an export machine that has been built for decades. Second, the misunderstanding, cheap labor equals China 2.0. Here's the most common argument. India has a young population. Wages are lower, so manufacturing will move there. And yes, some manufacturing is moving, but that's not the whole game. China's advantage isn't just wages. China's advantage is that it built something rare, a manufacturing ecosystem. Think of it like this. If you want to make a phone, you don't just need a factory. You need component suppliers, tooling companies, precision machining, packaging, logistics, QA labs, industrial engineers, and nearby ports that can move parts in and finished goods out without drama. China has clusters where those things exist within a short drive. That density is the real magic. And this shows up in manufacturing weight. China's manufacturing value-added share of GDP has stayed high relative to most major economies, while India's has remained much lower and far more uneven. This isn't because India can't manufacture, it's because scaling manufacturing to China-level dominance requires land acquisition that doesn't take forever, stable industrial power, consistent logistics, and an ability to build dense clusters quickly. That's not a talent problem, that's a systems problem, and systems are slow. Third, India's demographic advantage has a deadline. Now, let's talk demographics, because this is where India truly has an advantage. India's population is large and still relatively young compared to China. China is aging. India is not, at least not yet. So the story goes, India will have workers while China runs out. But here's the part people skip. A young population only becomes an advantage if you create enough good jobs. Otherwise, it becomes unemployment pressure. The World Bank has warned that India risks squandering its demographic dividend if job creation doesn't keep pace, particularly for young people. That's the nightmare scenario. A country can have millions of working-age people and still struggle if manufacturing doesn't absorb them. Formal services can't scale fast enough, and the informal economy stays too large. The China model worked partly because China industrialized at a speed that absorbed labor into higher productivity work. India is improving, but it has not matched that transformation. And one of the most telling pressure points is women's employment. India's female labor force participation has improved in recent years, but it remains a major structural issue compared to other large economies. And economists still describe big gaps in job quality. If half your population can't fully participate in formal, productive employment, the ceiling is lower. That doesn't mean India can't become rich. It means the catch China fast story gets harder. 4. Logistics and urbanization, the unsexy China advantage. Here's the thing about manufacturing dominance. It doesn't live in spreadsheets. It lives in roads, ports, warehouses, power grids, and cities. China is highly urbanized. India is not, at least not yet. India's urban population share is around mid-30%, 2024. China's urbanization is around the mid-60% range. Why does that matter? Because dense urbanization makes everything cheaper to scale. Worker mobility, supplier networks, logistics, infrastructure per person, and productivity spillovers. Now, look at logistics directly. In the World Bank's Logistics Performance Index, LPI 2023, India ranked 38th. That's actually a strong improvement story. But China's logistics ecosystem is still one of the most industrially integrated on the planet, and China's export dominance is evidence of that scale. And then there's power. India has achieved near universal electricity access, around 99% plus by recent World Bank data. That's huge progress, but access isn't the same as industrial reliability. Even in industrial corridors, outages and power quality can still be a constraint for factories, especially for precision manufacturing where a single voltage drop can ruin production runs. Again, not a fatal flaw, but it's one more friction point. China's system is built to minimize friction for industry. India is still building that. 5. Innovation isn't a vibe, it's spending. This is where the debate usually gets emotional. People will say, India has talent, engineers, entrepreneurs, AI. True. But innovation at national scale isn't just talent. It's money, institutions, and a pipeline that turns research into factories. A brutal but useful proxy is R&D spending as a share of GDP. India's R&D intensity has been around 0.6 to 0.7% of GDP in recent years, according to India's own science and technology statistics. China's R&D system is far larger in absolute terms, with spending in the hundreds of billions of dollars and strong growth in recent years. Even if India has brilliant people, China is funding innovation at a scale that's difficult to match quickly. And this matters because advanced manufacturing dominance comes from materials science, process engineering, automation, and industrial upgrading, not just apps. India is excellent at parts of the service economy. China has built a machine that turns research and industrial policy into physical production capacity. That's why it remains the largest exporter and a central node in global supply chains. The part everyone misses. Beating China is multiple competitions. Here's where the whole conversation gets clearer. Beating China can mean 3 different things. A. Total GDP size. India could eventually become extremely large, possibly even rival China in total size far in the future, depending on growth and demographics. B. Manufacturing plus export dominance. That's a different competition, and China's lead is enormous today in both value and ecosystem depth. C. Per capita productivity. That's the hardest one. China's income per person is multiple times India's today. India can win one of these, or partly win two. But the India replaces China story implies India wins all three at once. And that's the part that doesn't pencil out. So what actually happens next? Now, if this was a bad YouTube video, this is where I'd go. Therefore, India is doomed. It's not. India's trajectory can still be incredible, but it will likely look different than China's. Here's the more realistic picture. India becomes a superpower in services and selective manufacturing. India has already built world-scale capacity in services, and that can keep compounding. Manufacturing grows, but in specific lanes. Electronics assembly, autos, pharmaceuticals, industrial goods? Yes. But rebuilding the entire China-style manufacturing universe takes longer than most people think, because supply chains aren't just factories, they're networks. China doesn't stand still. China is not frozen in time waiting to be replaced. It's actively pushing advanced manufacturing, automation, and tech self-reliance. So the target is moving. That's the real reason the catch-up narrative is so hard. The ending nobody likes, but it's the truth. India can become richer, it can become more influential, it can become a manufacturing giant. But beating China in the way people casually mean it, becoming the dominant export manufacturing hub with comparable productivity, requires clearing multiple bottlenecks at once, scaling formal job creation fast enough to convert demographics into productivity, building urban industrial density on China's level, deepening supply chains beyond assembly into components, tooling, and industrial services, raising innovation intensity over decades, and doing it while China continues upgrading and defending its industrial base. That's why the most accurate takeaway isn't India will never win, it's India is playing a different game, and China is still the heavyweight in the game people think India is about to dominate. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe.